everybody. Welcome back for another episode of the Warm Up Podcast. Today, I am so excited to be here with Dakota Jones. He is the founder and executive director of Footprints Running. And many of you probably don't know this about me, but outside of working for Keep Nature Wild, I am an avid trail and ultra runner myself. So being able to talk with Dakota about kind of marrying environmental advocacy and running is kind of my dream conversation. So I am thrilled to have Dakota here with me, and I would love to pass it over to you, Dakota, and just have you introduce yourself a little bit and then give us a brief overview of what Footprints is. And
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on here. It's an honor to be here. So my name is Dakota Jones. I guess I'm 31 years old now. And so I live in Montana in Bozeman, and I have been, a professional trail runner since at least 10 years now, which, sounds like a big deal, but it's like barely scraping by. I have to.
Hey, it's longer than
I don't pay my bills with like sponsorships or something like that. But anyway, I've been like a part of the running world for a long time, and I started running ultra marathons when I was in high school, and it's like been a huge part of my life. Like basically my entire adult life, this has kind of been a major defining component of it, and that goes beyond like the sport itself. It's like the community around the sport, and that really builds into Footprints, which we'll talk about in a bit. But so I still compete a little less. I'm in engineering school these days, so going to school, and I also run Footprints, which is turning into a real thing that's taking a lot of time in a good way. I got a lot of balls in the air, everybody does. It's silly. We're all too busy. But I'm really fortunate to be able to do the sport that I love and address the issues that worry me the most by using the community that I love the most. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm just so thrilled, and everyone's going to hear me geek out about running too, because this is like my behind the scenes, not so behind the scenes, but my out of work passion. Getting to talk to you about all things, just running and the community, because once you touched on that, I was like, yes, this community is amazing. And because we are such avid users of outdoor spaces, like we have such an obligation, in my opinion, but also the power to create a lot of change and do a lot of positive good with this community, because we have so many people that are outside recreating so often and so frequently on these trails, and so many people are so in touch with nature and like outdoor spaces through running. So it just gives them more of a purpose behind what they're doing.
So that's the idea. Is I guess I didn't talk about Footprints yet. I don't know if people probably don't know about it. So Footprints.
Give us
So the idea behind Footprints is we want to help people take realistic, meaningful action on climate change. That's the basic, purpose behind what we're doing, because I have so many conversations with people who are like, I like recycle and I ride my bike to work and I eat vegetarian and this and this and this, but it's like climate change is still getting worse. Like, how can I actually make a difference? And it's a question that I've had and I still have all the time. It's not something that I've solved. I haven't like figured out the secret, and I'm going to provide it through Footprints. Like Footprints is basically an organization focused on addressing that. And what it really looks like is addressing a global issue is like, it's something that we have to do in a million different ways. And the way we do it is by finding what are your skills and connections and your network, and how can you make the best use of all of that within your community, right? And so I'm a trail runner. I've been like a part of this world and this community for a long time. And so we focus in on trail running. It's like I have a somewhat of a platform in trail running. And so we've built these camps, and the idea behind the camp, that's the main product of Footprints, is we have these running camps, and 10 people come out and they apply by saying, here's what I want to do. This is like a project or a problem in my community that I'm worried about, and I want to address this, and I need your help to turn this into like a project that involves the whole community to address this problem. And these are very different things. Some of them are like film projects to like share like new information or new knowledge or resources, sharing stories and bringing people together around things like art and film. Some of them are like like last year we had people working on developing water quality studies, or in a lake in upstate New York, where they're having all kinds of algae blooms. And it's so there's like really scientific stuff, there's really community oriented stuff, there's political stuff. We really aren't looking for a specific thing, because climate change is everything. And so we want to know what you're worried about, and like what's your lever? How can you take action on that? And then we pair all these campers. They come to us. We spend a week running in the mountains in Colorado in the summer, and each camper is paired with an expert in climate change or climate science, climate action. Some of them are truly like climate scientists, but a lot of them are like business leaders or nonprofit leaders. Some of them are professional athletes. They're just people who understand how to make use of a community and different resources to put together a project that involves more people. Because the thing about these projects too is we're not just like helping these campers take one action, like cleaning up water quality in one creek or something. What we're doing is we want them to be leaders for collective action. So we're giving them a template and a process and developing this project that will galvanize their whole community and get as many people on board as possible. And so behind all this, it's a great idea, right? Putting it into action is like an ongoing process. Like, how do we actually do a good job of this? Well, I'm learning this every day, but it's really exciting because it's that the way that we've set it up is like, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Climate change is everybody's fault, and everybody can be part of the solution. And so we're working on it every single day. This is a work in progress, and like, it's very collaborative. I could talk about it for a while.
Yes. And I want to like delve into it even further because I already have so many questions coming up from what you just shared. And I think like from here, I want to even like backstep a little bit and just have you tell me, the origin story for this, because I think this is such a big project and like initiative to take on. It had to come from somewhere. So I would love for you just to share, more about like your upbringing and your kind of relationship to outdoor spaces, because obviously that's where this like love originated from with the environment, would like come from your early years. So tell me about, like how are you
it's
connected
funny.
to the outdoors?
I don't know how I started caring about environmental issues originally. This has like always been a part of my life. Like, I remember being a little kid and like worrying a lot about environmental issues. Just like
Really interesting. Like where like what area were you raised in? Like were you always
I'm
from
like
kind
the
of the
luckiest
West
guy in the world.
or
I grew up in Moab,
okay.
Utah. And then I went to most of high school in Durango,
Okay.
Colorado. So it's like southern Utah, southwest Colorado, these extraordinary southwestern landscapes with high mountains and red rock canyons, and just this really, really special place. And my dad was really into outdoors. He was like a big, like into hunting and backpacking and fishing. And so we were doing that all the time and going camping and like climbing the peaks above Moab. And so that was a huge part of me as growing up. And it's like one of these things, when you're like 8 or 10 years old, it's kind of a chore. Like every week or two, you got to go like climb a mountain. It's a pain in the ass. But it was like a very clear shift for me. Like basically when I was like 15 or 16, I think about 15, I started to like get into it. Specifically, I got into rock climbing more, but I've been in the outdoors a lot. And then I was also running cross country too. And I found that like I really enjoyed cross country as a sport. So I was running, and I'd also started doing half marathons because I was intrigued by like the long distance. And so when you're like 14 and running cross country, a half marathon's a long way. It's a long way for anybody, depending on what you're doing. But,
well, I would say,
you
yeah. And I would say too, like growing up in those kinds of environments, like even Moab and like the San Juan range, those are very dramatic landscapes. And like if you're doing cross country and you're rock climbing, I would assume that, you're getting very intimately acquainted with these areas and these landscapes because you're like running and climbing through them. So did you see a lot of changes happening as you were growing up too? Like just from the spaces you were interacting with so much? Like was that part of you just like noticing like, oh, okay, now I'm seeing, drought more like when there used to be more water in Moab in these places, but now it's not. Or, like we used to have better
Yeah.
snowpack in the San Juans, but now it's
I
not.
think that
Was
that
that
came
worth it or
later
did that come
mostly, and
later?
especially now. It's like I've had a
Okay.
decade and a half of like really caring about this stuff and paying attention to it. When you're
Yeah.
15 years old or whatever, you don't really have that sense of perspective the same way. But I was aware of climate change. Like I remember in high school
Yeah.
being like really grateful when there was snow because I knew climate change was happening. I was committed to this,
Hmm.
and so it was something that was worrying me, even if I hadn't personally witnessed so many changes. Um,
Was that something that was being brought up in school to you, or like, yeah, like where did that innate
yeah,
kind of awareness come from? Because I feel like for me, I really had to kind of like seek out
yeah.
that information and teach myself about all of the different situations and environmental impacts and like events that were occurring. But it seems like that was almost like
In a
innately
way,
part
yeah.
of
So my
you.
dad was really into the outdoors and the outdoor communities, and so I was like reading magazines. I would
Okay.
read like the climbing magazines and the running magazines, and so you get a lot of that out of just like touching on it out of that stuff. Especially, I feel like climbing magazines are really,
Yeah.
at least historically, writing was this like really powerful form of storytelling for climbing in the climbing
Hmm.
culture. And so you get a
Hmm.
lot of these like personal essays in climbing world that talk about like climate change in Alaska or in the Himalayas where people have been going for a long time. And my dad also, he would like buy me the Edward Abbey
Yeah.
books. And so it's like, so I was like in this
Oh
environmental
yeah.
like headspace because of this stuff that I was reading. And Durango and Moab are pretty, like there's a lot of hippies. It's like a very outdoorsy town. These are like the
Yeah.
outdoors, and like environmentalism is very much built into the
People who
culture in
care.
these towns. And so it came, I don't know if I sought it out necessarily, but I was like surrounded by it all the time intentionally because I liked being a part of these communities. And then really like getting into, once I started running ultra marathons, um, then I was a part of this like mountain community in a big way, and dealing with people who
Yeah.
are very educated. The trail running world is very white and male, but it's also very educated. So
Yeah.
it should be educated. It should also be not just white and male. you know, but it's like I'm dealing with these
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who run ultra marathons who are like engineers and scientists and doctors, and so I don't know. You get
Yes.
this like pretty cool perspective. I had a lot of people that I was able to learn from in this way. I took an Outward Bound course when I was in high school, and they're very focused in on like
Okay.
environmental and personal health. Yeah, I don't know. It's like that is very.
Yeah.
I was just very fortunate growing up, and uh,
Yeah, well, but it also sounds like you sought out, these opportunities to continue to further these important conversations too. Like you weren't shy to like have a conversation with someone when you knew that like they were, a scientist or someone who did have a lot of information. You wanted to approach
yeah,
those discussions and learn more too. So I think there's a level of just like seeking, and learning more and having information and being an informed person, to be able to share that out too. So I would say that that is something of your character that is like a propeller for you. Is like, seeking out opportunities to learn and network, I
yeah,
guess, and have that
absolutely.
kind of
It's like I've
connection.
always wanted. I always loved like the climbing culture because it was all these like travel stories, and I loved travel stories and just adventure stories.
Hmm.
And I always really, really wanted to travel a lot. And I also recognized, even like towards the end of high school, that I lived in an amazing place, and I was really getting to environmental just issues, but also mountain sports. And I was really focused in on like the experience of being out there, and like trying to like understand
Hmm.
where I was and what I was doing there and like why and how it all like felt, and like understand these experiences in a very personal way. It's kind of funny. It's like being in engineering school now is quite strange in a lot of ways because I spent so many years like
Yeah.
I didn't do math. I didn't do like science and stuff at all. Like I was really focused in on just
Hmm.
like being alive here in this landscape.
Yeah. 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 So tell me too, like, so obviously from high school and on, that became like a pretty big part of you, of just like, yeah, I'm very drawn to these the environmental campaigns and like learning more and advocating. So did you pursue that in any other way in that time, like from high school to like,
Yeah.
early 20s and stuff? Like
I wish I
what
had.
was the pathway?
I would
Like
just
what
like,
did you
I
do?
wanted to travel and just like see the world and have adventures. I got into trail
Yeah.
running specifically. Well, it's like, I don't know, in Colorado and Utah, it's like if you run on trails because there's like running on roads isn't that sweet, and there's
Yeah.
trails everywhere. It's like, you know, it's not, it's
Yes.
this thing where you don't realize you're doing a special sport until it's like you like go to a race and people start defining
Yeah.
it that way. But like, yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
so I was really really into climbing when I was like 16 17, and I really wanted to be like the people in Alpinist magazine, like climbing in these big peaks in Alaska and Peru. But then I volunteered at the Hard Rock 100, which is just north of Durango where I was going to high school. And I did
Yes.
this, I was at the 50-mile point where you have to backpack in all the supplies to the aid station, and I stayed up all night seeing this happen. And my dad and I had spent the previous week camping in the area, and I had like started getting really excited. I was like, oh yeah, I
Yes.
can climb this peak, and just seeing what you could do. And then seeing these runners do it basically with hardly any gear and really quickly, I was like, well, this is all the adventure
Yes.
that I want, but I don't have to like have a partner. I don't have to know how to use all these ropes. I don't have to, I already live here. I don't have to go to
Yes.
Alaska, right? It was just so much more accessible. And so looking for that sense of adventure, I just got
Hmm.
super into it. And I think that in tandem, the community of trail running, it's just incredibly welcoming and friendly and wonderful and supportive. And we do races, they're competitive, sure, but it's like that's almost just like
Hmm.
a structure
Hmm.
that gives like a sense of like a framework to the sport. A lot of like almost,
Yeah.
what's the percentage? It's got to be like less than 5% of people who are doing ultra marathons that actually care about position, right? Like it's just being out there with the community, doing something
Yeah.
really
Yeah, I would
challenging,
say.
and often sharing that with other people, some of whom are your
Hmm.
closest friends, some of whom are about to be your closest friends. Uh, and
Hmm.
I just like, I was 17, and it's like that's still young, I think, for trail running, but it's like
Oh yeah.
it's become more common for young people to get into it. I was like very much an outlier when I started running as like a teenager at these ultra marathons. Uh, but I didn't do it to like be the youngest guy. I was just really excited about the sports. And then so many people were really friendly and helping me out. They like took me on these runs. They taught me all this stuff. And at the same time, I
Oh
was just
yeah.
like hucking it into the backcountry and just getting worked, like you don't know how to, like I never ever ate anything on a run. And then all of a sudden I'm like 15 and miles and 4 hours into the mountains, and I don't have any food. That's not a great place to
Yeah.
be. So you learn quick from that experience, right? Uh,
Yes. Yeah. And it also just gives you a lot of time to think, and, like you're just out there for hours at a time, like just just
totally.
completely immersed in nature. So I feel like for me, a lot of like my best thinking, a lot of my best ideas, a lot of my, like, I feel most connected to the world when I'm out there. Like, you're just taking in these incredible landscapes and like doing these really challenging things. It's just like you're just endlessly in awe of nature and like the amazing places we get to access like with
Totally.
our own 2 feet, but also just that this
Yeah.
exists in the world. Is pretty incredible. So I feel like that's a great tie-in too of like what you're doing with footprints, is that like our community, I feel like anybody that you could ask would say, I mean, most of them would say like, yeah, I get out there on the trails because like that is like my form of like decompressing and connecting, and like you're just so much more like at peace when you're out there in nature. But I feel like once I've started to learn more about environmental impact and just like the surroundings around me, like I pay attention so much to things of just like, wow, like we haven't had rain in this
Yeah.
long, like it's so dusty on the trails, or like there's just so many things that you just start to pay attention to because you're so connected to it when you're out there. Or like I'll run by, you know, the same cactus every week because I'm doing the same routes in my neighborhood, and you're
Yeah.
just like, oh, like now the blossoms are blooming on the cacti, or like, and now they're changing, or like, wow, we didn't get any rain like the last monsoon season, so nothing's as green as it should be, or like you just start to kind of like experience the
Totally.
scientific process, I
Yeah.
guess, of like observing and making, hypotheses about things. And I'm sure that that's part of like where your story comes from too, of just like getting out in the backcountry for hours and hours and hours at a time. And then you start to like marry those things, like your scientific interest and like wanting to know more about environmental and climate action and education merges
Absolutely.
with trail running. I would love for you to talk a little bit more about like how that came to be, like when you started to kind of come up with the idea of like kind of merging those two, like what was that process, like what
Yeah.
got you there?
Yeah, what you were talking about a little earlier, it like reminds me, or it just makes me think. I think that one thing that really was good for me with running, which is probably good for a lot of people, whether it's running or any sport or like pursuit of some sort of
Mm-hmm.
goal or skill, is like running long distances is really hard. It's a struggle. It's not always this like
Mm-hmm.
magical jaunt through the meadows, like it's often just like grunting and sweating and working hard, and you're like over it and ready to be done. Yeah,
Wearing
it
into
like comes and
the
goes. And like,
spaces.
but the thing is, like, dealing with that, getting into that situation and getting over it and finishing that, like surviving it, that gives you a tremendous sense of
Yes.
accomplishment and like a sense of fulfillment and
Mm-hmm.
capability. Like I think it validates you, and I think a lot of us,
Mm-hmm.
especially when we're young, we have all this like angst and energy, and we just like kind of feel helpless. And I don't know, it's just like you're like, who am I? What am I trying to do
Mm-hmm.
here? And like, if you're not able to accomplish things, then you don't feel like you have much of a sense of purpose or a sense of self, I think. And the only
Mm-hmm.
way really to do that is you
Mm-hmm.
have to struggle. You have to be willing to be bad at something and just struggle and then overcome it. And I feel like nearly every
Mm-hmm.
every structure, every system in our society is about like not struggling. You want it to be easy. You don't want, if it's hard, you got to like change something. Sometimes you do. Absolutely. You don't have to just be suffering for the point of suffering, but accomplishing things requires hard work. And if you're able to like put yourself through something difficult and work through it and get to the other side, it gives you a really strong sense of personal well-being. And it doesn't have to be running, it doesn't even have to be
Mm-hmm.
physical, you just have to like be working through something difficult and overcome that. um, and that gives you, yeah, I don't know, building on that, it makes you feel like you're capable of things, it makes you feel like things are possible. And for runners, it's
Yes.
quite, the metaphor is super simple and obvious, right? It's like I ran long, I got tired, I kept my
Yeah.
feet moving, like the metaphor is just like fall into place for
Yeah.
running, but it really goes for any issue or any struggle and skill. And so for me, I'm out in the backcountry in these pretty wild places because I got to live there and working hard
Yeah.
and overcoming this. And I also had a strong support group in the community, the trail running community. And so I just felt like this was the right thing for me to do, and I loved doing it. And building that into like this environmental stuff that my dad had introduced me to, um, that really was very powerful for me. So, quickly as I'm running ultra marathons, getting into ultra marathons and long distance running and mountains, I'm also starting to read all the blogs, which was a thing back then. And like reading all these environmental
Yeah.
books and like learning all about just environmental issues and environmental history, like not so much academic, but it's more like these like, I don't know, Edward Abbey style books where it's more about like the personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
These days I tend to focus more in on like environmental
Mm-hmm.
history or like environmental science, but it's just like it's not like one is better than the other. It's just back then I was more on like focusing in on like the
Yeah.
experience of being out there and trying to make sense of what I was doing and why. So I was like very much attuned to environmental issues, very much afraid of them, very much feeling guilty about, especially as, 5 or 6 years after I started running ultra marathons, I started having success and I started making a career out of it because I'm very competitive, and I
Mm-hmm.
also have this like ego and I want to race and I want to do well, and I like
Mm-hmm.
built this whole career out of like promoting myself, which I have many mixed feelings about and have over for a whole long time. But I was like, okay, sweet, here I get to travel for free around the world and do these amazing races. That's what I've been wanting to do. And so I was doing that, and also afraid of like, I have this big environmental impact, and I was aware of that, and I was like, I got to do something, but I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what, and I can't talk about it because I'm so hypocritical doing all this other stuff. And that is the way that everybody feels. We're always like, oh, I can't talk about climate change because I drive a car, I fly in airplanes, I eat meat, and that's very wrong, but it's very natural to feel that way, and it's a conversation that we can get into in later. But basically, it's like I don't think I took like meaningful climate action. I didn't start becoming like an outward environmentalist. I was very much an inward environmentalist, but I wasn't outward about it at all until about 2017. And in the fall of the year before that, Donald Trump was elected president. And I remember like literally being afraid of the future, like in a way that I never have before. Like, this is a bad person who is going to harm our world and our society. And
and just so many rollbacks on environmental policy and like, our preservation, conservation. I don't know how many people on here like know actually how much he did like with rolling back policy and stuff, but there were over 100 different environmental policies that he rolled back or changed so that there could be more use of land and use of minerals and resources. So I completely understand where
and
that
so I'm sitting there like, well, I can't I can't just like not do anything now. I have to get involved. And so that's when I started getting involved with Protect Our Winters. And if I don't know if you're familiar with Protect Our Winters, but they're a nonprofit that was founded by a snowboarder named Jeremy Jones, who is he's a very famous snowboarder. But the point was about mobilizing the outdoor industry to take meaningful action on climate change. And specifically, they work in the political arena. So they have like a ton of professional athlete ambassadors who are basically trying to get people in the outdoor industry to vote. That's really all it is. Like, call your representatives. That's a really big one too. But also, we really just need people to vote because there's so much apathy in voting, especially among young people. And so if people just vote, it's a big deal, really. And so and actually they've been very successful. POW is basically like the only outdoor like environmental organization that I know of that mobilizes people under the age of 40 reliably. And so I started getting involved with them, and through them I've learned a whole lot about how to do this, like what advocacy looks like. How can I talk about climate change even though I still live a fossil fuel driven lifestyle? Like how can I like use my community for all these good things?
I feel like there's a slogan I see go around too, where it's like, we don't need one person doing climate change perfectly. We need thousands and thousands and thousands of people doing it imperfectly, but they're trying. Like, we just all need to try and like take steps. It's like we're never going to be perfect because like it's not feasible or a reality that we can live completely, fossil fuel free and like, we're never going to make an impact like we are, but we just need so many people to just take steps.
Anything counts. And the thing is, like POW uses the term imperfect advocacy, which is what you just said. And I love that term because we cannot be perfect. And if everybody has to be perfect before they can talk about this, then the fight is lost. And the thing really is that, like, for example, if I fly, like I'm actually going to Spain to race this week. Which will be sweet. Like, I'll have a great experience. Good job, Dakota. But it's like, there's a big climate impact flying to Spain. That releases a lot of carbon dioxide. That trip, I haven't looked into it. I will offset it, but that's just a small thing. The point is, like, that trip will emit, let's say, 2,000 pounds of carbon dioxide or something just from the travel alone. If we protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, we're looking at like 7 billion tons of carbon protected. I'm just I did a presentation last week and I don't think that's the exact number. But the point is that there is so much more carbon stored in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge that no single person's lifetime carbon emissions can anywhere approach that. Okay. So the point is that you could stop flying, you could stop driving. That's great. It will have a impact so much smaller than protecting the Arctic national wildlife alone that it's completely negligible. Literally, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge has enough. If you like put all that oil, all the carbon from there into the atmosphere, it would be more than 2.3 million Americans' lifetime carbon emissions. And Americans have the largest carbon emissions per capita in the world. And so the point of that, I wish I had explained that better, but I think you see what I'm trying to go with that. The point of that is that your individual actions matter because they connect you to the issue, they connect you to the action and the community and the why of what you're doing, but they don't matter enough to stop climate change. What matters to stop climate change has to happen at the government and the corporate level. There's just no way to stop climate change other than that. Yes. What they say is like all the easy answers disappeared in the 80s. You know, we didn't do it then, so we have to take action now, and we have to take it on a huge scale. And it's super scary and overwhelming, but this really like ties into footprints is we are taking community level action. Does it matter? Well, you know, if one person does a project in their community, probably not. But it does connect that person to their community. It does galvanize multiple people in their community, and it's setting an example. Because when the politicians are like, okay, sure, I'd love to like shut down this refinery, but like, how can we do that in a way that will be a just transition so that those people who are losing their jobs can still make money and support their families? And how can we like keep our energy dominance or whatever, you know, whatever stupid terms they use. It's like, they need examples. We have to be able to say, you're right. Those people deserve jobs. They're just working hard to support their families. And you know what? We need energy. It's okay to use energy. We use resources to be alive. These things have to continue to happen. It's okay. We need to show them examples. Like renewable energy creates more jobs. It creates more energy. It's more reliable. It creates better energy independence. I'm really rambling here, and I'm sorry.
No, it's so right though. Like, I think that there are a lot of roadblocks to like the conversation, I guess, when it comes to, I think there are a lot of like hot button topics that are embedded in it too. Of like, well, if we go this like all natural route, then like what happens to these billions of people that are like doing the work, or like, you know, they show up at the coal mine, or they're, you know, they're part of the energy company. And it's like, we have to show that there's still need for people. And like, you know, us switching to something else doesn't mean that this just disappears, you know, like us trying to navigate to something that's going to take care of our planet and, you know, help us sustain things doesn't mean that it's at the detriment of other people. And, you know, when we're using different renewable resources or doing things like that, like it's going to open up so many different avenues for positions that may not even exist right now. Like we can't even say like, oh, this person does such and such because
there are already more jobs in renewable energy than in the fossil fuel industry. And the fossil fuel industry historically does not take care of its employees. The employees, it's like a boom and bust cycle. They make a ton of money all at once, and then they run out of oil, or their jobs get cut, or like, you know, they build these pipelines which employs a ton of people right off the bat. It looks great, but then they like, you know, they'll have a 2,000-mile pipeline that's managed by 10 people. And also it doesn't, it harms people's health. Working in a coal mine is like the worst possible thing you could do for your health. You know, they have
just the longevity of a job,
and we want to take care of people, and that's the whole thing about the just transition. That's really what we focus in on with climate action is, yes, we want to like have this natural biodiverse world, but we are people, and we make sense of the world through our relationships to other people. And it's really, really important to talk about it in a way that brings people into the conversation and brings people into the solution. And one thing that I always like to point out is, like, I've told you all about how my dad like made me an environmentalist. Basically, my dad was a chemical engineer who spent 35 years working in the oil and gas industry. I had a very like
interesting.
I was very wealthy relatively. You know, I'm like super rich, but I'm a white American. I'm fine. And I like had a great upbringing because my father worked in the oil and gas industry. And so it's like
Hmm.
there are many stories, sure, of executives from Exxon and Shell who are actively like harming the planet in terrible ways because they're preventing legislation from happening that would harm their fossil fuel businesses.
Yeah.
But the overwhelming majority of people who work in the oil and gas industry are hardworking, highly skilled, motivated people who want to put food on the table for their families. And so what we're trying to do with like
Yeah.
climate action
Yeah.
is like give those people a sense of purpose and a job and a paycheck so that they can still support themselves, support their families, live lives that are meaningful to themselves, and also not be harmed by coal
Mm-hmm.
like dust. You know?
Yeah. That's such a great tie-in too, because like you have personal experience, obviously, and I'm sure the conversations even with your dad have been really interesting to just hear
Yeah.
like different perspectives, I'm sure, over the years. Um, but yeah, like just remembering that we're all humans and like the innate drive to like take care of our families, and you know that that is a driver, and like having the financial security. And most of the people that are involved in these areas, you know, logging, mining, you know, anything to do with gas and resources, we could villainize them and say like anybody involved is like a terrible person, they're doing terrible things to the
Yeah.
planet, but really they're just like trying to do their best too in the way that they know how. And it's like, how do we meet at the table to have these kinds of discussions and like shift the perspective in a way that makes sense for everyone, um, and come
Absolutely. Yeah.
together for like a greater good, because
Yeah.
it's got to be there somewhere, you know, like we're all trying to strive towards, you know, taking care of ourselves, taking care of our offspring, taking care of our future. It's just like meeting
Totally.
on the
Yeah.
same
You know,
levels, you know.
the news and social media, you look at that and it's just like headlines of absolute insanity. These people who are just so
Yeah,
overtly anti-progress or anti-renewable energy or anti like Black Lives Matter. These things that these people who say the most
yeah,
insane stuff that's like so obviously evil and harming people. And the thing that's so important to remember is like
yeah,
those people get the headlines because these platforms are entertainment. They're not like everything that goes on there is
mm-hmm,
about like getting people's attention, getting their eyes. And so the most insane stuff ends up at the top of the list, and those people at the same time are always the loudest. So you get so from the news and from
yeah,
these like
yeah,
people, you get the sense that that's like the mood, you know, that people are like anti-Jewish, anti-black,
mm,
anti-climate action. And that's
mm-hmm,
not the case. The majority of people understand that climate change is real and that it's our fault, and they don't know what to do and they want to help.
yeah,
People are compassionate, people care about other people,
yeah,
and if we just like look at what the headlines say, we're going to have a skewed perspective on who other people are and what they really want.
yeah. That's a great point to make. And there's a lot of like
Yeah,
doom scrolling, and like, you know, it's just like this, like there's no positivity, or like where do we go from here kind of thing if you're like just paying attention to that stuff, when really, yeah, exactly what you're saying. Like so many people are just like, I know this is happening.
yeah,
I'm reading about it everywhere. It is like it is in our faces. You know, you can't avoid it at this point. That these things, these conversations are happening. These reports are coming out. Like this is real time. But then
yeah.
it's like, whoa, I'm so
Totally overwhelmed.
overwhelmed. I don't know
Yeah,
what to do. Like, I'm just one person. Like, how do I even start the conversation? Like, where do I go? Like, what do I do? And I feel like that is very crippling to so many people. It's just this existential dread of like, okay, yeah, now I'm aware it's happening. It's all around
yeah.
me, but I'm just one
And
person.
you know
Like,
that
what can I possibly do?
ties so for one, I don't have an answer to that. I don't have like everybody wants to be like, what can I do to stop climate
Yeah,
change?
yeah,
And I'm like, okay, well, I got 20 questions for you, and then I can give you a vague direction. But
yeah, yeah,
the metaphor, a running metaphor, I think comes into play well here, where you're just like, keep moving, do what you can, take a step. Every step counts,
yeah,
even if it's a small one, even if it doesn't seem to matter. You can't finish a 100-mile run unless you take big steps and small steps. You just got to keep taking steps, moving
yeah.
forward. Exactly.
Sometimes
It's
crawling.
crazy. You know, it's so hard. It's so overwhelming. And actually, one of the projects for this summer's camp is a camper who is a teacher, and she wants to basically help teach students about climate change in a way that feels like they can take action. And
Mm,
she's like, you know, they're overwhelmed by bad news, and they
mm,
just we're completely incapacitated by how big these problems are and the way that we see them constantly all in your face. It's overwhelming for all of us. And then, if you're 16 or 17, like, it's even worse, especially, I mean, I'm not that old, but I didn't have social media the way they do now. And so it's in your face even more now.
Same. Yeah. Yeah. I just read I follow quite a few like social media accounts that are like reports on climate change and like all this stuff. But one of the things that was shared was about how like climate anxiety is becoming such a real thing. Like it's not something that was happening before, but now like our youth and like because we have social media, like climate change anxiety is becoming like a very common kind of anxiety that people are seeing because everybody is becoming so just alert and aware. We are informed, but it's like just so it's so heavy. Like people are just like, I'm crippled by the idea that this is happening and like I can't do anything about it, kind of thing. Yeah, so like social media can be a positive, but it can bring a lot of like, okay, cool, I'm seeing this, but what do I even do from here? So like having teachers and like having people that are in positions of, authority or like leadership that can give tools to say, okay, like here's this huge unsolvable problem, but here are the steps that you can take that like it becomes digestible and it becomes like palatable, that there are things that we can all do on our own individual levels to make a positive change over time. All of these things do add up. And like, obviously that ties into what you were saying about protect our winters too, of just like voting and like paying attention on a local level, paying attention on a state level, paying attention on like a national level.
Really
that
does.
all matters so much. Yeah. And I would love to even say like we got into this huge conversation after that, but like where did you go from protect our winters?
Yeah.
Like,
So
what
protect
happened
our
after
winters
that?
was how I started learning what climate advocacy can look like and how I can start basically being brave enough to put myself out there and publicly talk about this, even though I didn't feel like I was qualified to do that. I guess my short answer there is I want everybody to know that you don't have to understand climate change to take action on it. You're allowed to talk about it, even if you don't understand atmospheric science. It's okay. You're allowed to talk about it, even if you fly in an airplane for a living. The thing is that we don't need to stop living in the modern world with technology. We just need to transition the way we get energy, basically, from one form to another. And so for me, I started working with Protect Our Winters. I went to this like climate march with them in DC in 2017. And then they have this, I guess they don't so much anymore. It's kind of evolved, but they had this program where they would take athletes and we'd go to schools, like middle and high schools around the country, and give presentations about climate change. And they do it well because they have these amazing athletes, like people who literally jump off cliffs and do backflips for a living. Like, and so we have these amazing videos. We show these high schoolers and they're like, whoa, people like hitting these amazing lines in Alaska skiing, and like, it's really cool. And then it's like, hey, I'm a runner. I go like 10-minute miles.
You do pretty cool stuff though too. If people only knew like the kinds of environments
it's
you were
fun.
like running and experiencing,
So I'd like go to, I did several of these where I'd like go to high schools and middle schools around all over and give talks about climate change and getting involved. And I just started getting more involved. And then, I did still like want to reduce my own impacts, and I was doing a lot of different things to try to address that. At one point I took a cargo ship to France because I didn't want to fly. And I like looked it up and it's like, okay, apparently according to sustainable travel people, because the cargo ship really is going to go whether or not you're on it and your weight is negligible, it's technically carbon neutral. That was a cool experience. It was cool. It was a long trip. Like? I'm into it. I'm glad I did it. Ultimately, I wouldn't do it again because, it doesn't actually make sense on a large scale. It makes sense for me because I'm the only person. Well, I guess there was another passenger, but it's like the boat really was going either way. But if everybody started like stopping flying, started stopping. If everybody went cargo ship only instead of flying, then the economics would change. Then those boats would go based on demand, the way that airplanes do, right? So it doesn't make sense to scale up. I'm glad I did it. It was part of this process of trying and learning. I think the coolest like combination of climate action and outdoor sports that I've done was in 2018. I ran the Pikes Peak Marathon, which is in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And
Okay.
I'm from Southwest Colorado. I was living there. And so I rode my bike. I did a bike tour up to the race. And so it was about 200 miles or 250 miles.
Incredible.
And I just like spent like, I don't know, 4 or 5 days biking up there, trying not to bike too much in a day and camping. And then I had like 4 days of rest, and then I ran the marathon and I biked back. And it was this like big gesture, you know, for me, the mountains are more important than the races that I do in the mountains. But in a perfect world, we can have both. We can have like climate action, and we can also have, you know, sports and recreate in the mountains. Like that's the end goal. We need to be able to have both. And because you know, beyond anything else, giving up our favorite things is not going to get people involved. We have to bring people in by like allowing them to make these subtle shifts that will allow us to have these things that fulfill us in a way that won't damage the planet.
I think that's a great way to bring into like when we were talking about how great the running community is. And just like before we started recording, I was talking about how like in Phoenix, I started an all women's trail running group. And so it's just like you need to be able to have like these outlets that are like super positive for the community. Like this is really great for people to connect. And like this is the same with, you know, any of the experiences you had with like with people from the Hard Rock course and like all of these things that were like just so fulfilling for you on like a human level, you know, like it's so nurturing and it's like fulfilling to be out there with these people, and you learn so much and you have amazing conversations and connections. So like, what would that look like if we just said, nope, we can't do this anymore because, you know, we make an impact, but we make an impact doing anything. So instead it's like, how do you mobilize these communities to pay attention and just like be intentional and like motivated with not only do we love and we're passionate about running, but then like get passionate about the places you're running in, get passionate about like the land you're on and like what we do, because we are impacting. But it's like, how do you just create like a mobilized force within that community to like give back and do good too? So it's like, okay, like we can still do this, but then it's kind of what you were saying about like offsetting the trip you're going to take to Spain. It's like, okay, now we offset the fact that we're like going out and running all the time and like we're experiencing these areas by like going back and doing something good for the planet too. So I think it's creating like intentional runners, you know, like mindful runners who are like becoming the true advocates for the spaces that we're in all the time. Yeah. And I feel like that's what that's also what you're doing is like facilitating a space for, you know, passionate outdoor recreators, like people who are runners, to also say, okay, now I can actually take these tools that I have as, you know, an outdoor runner, an outdoor hiker, like whatever way that they are moving through outdoor spaces. But now I'm also going to have tools that I can take back to my community and advocate for the planet and like taking care of nature and doing better for like those around me. And then hopefully that becomes a web and they are like inspiring other people to do the same.
That's it. You got it. We just have to make it as easy as possible for that web to be formed. The bottom line is that individual actions aren't enough. So we need collective action. And so the more collective we are in every aspect of our lives, the better. So create it whenever you like to do something, find somebody else who likes to do that too. Find a lot of other people, bring them together. Footprints is a running camp that talks about climate change, but really it's a template for using a shared interest to talk about climate change and to provide solutions. So if you're really into like video games, that's awesome. So are a lot of other people, you know, let's do a video game Footprints. That'd be kind of weird and unexpected, but I bet we could make it happen.
Probably really cool.
And so I guess the last thing about the Pikes Peak thing was that as I came home, I was like, oh, that was great. Cool. Like I did a thing that was worth it. But it's also, I saved 2 tanks of gas. My clothes were from like Malaysia, you know, there was a lot of imperfections in that. And again, that doesn't mean it wasn't worth it, but I had to like come to terms with the fact that I saved about 700 pounds of carbon from being emitted, which when you think about the fact that there are about 86 trillion pounds of carbon emitted each year in the world, it's nothing. And so I had to think about how can I both scale this up and make it possible for other people. And the last thing that I had to come to terms with was that I'm a professional athlete who doesn't have a job or a family. I mean, I have a job. I have lots of little jobs, but not, I don't have a 9 to 5. I don't have a wife and a
Yeah.
bunch of kids, or, like I'm able to take 2+ weeks
Yeah.
off and go on this cool trip, riding my bike through the mountains. Not everybody can do that. And most people cannot do that, right? Like we have to
Yeah.
provide solutions that are actually available to most people. And the way I think that we can do that is by just asking people what they can do. What is your lever? What are your interests? What do you have time for and energy for? How can we use what you already are best at? Because that's how we're going to address climate change from the million different perspectives that are required to actually create a solution. So that's how Footprints came about rather than saying, hey, come to us and we'll teach you how to be like Dakota. We'll be like, well, first of all, Dakota doesn't know what's going on, so he's going to hire the people who do. Okay, that was step one. And then we want you to propose what you want to do. And you don't have to have it figured out. That's the point of the camp. But you're like, hey, I'm an engineer and I want to like fix this water quality issue. Or like, I'm an artist and I want to get people involved with this advertising campaign. Or, whatever your lever is or your interests and skills and network are, like we can make use of that. And it's just important that it's yours. It's not ours. We'll give you a tool, we'll give you a template,
Yeah.
but it's not about us. It's about you.
When was the first camp?
Yeah.
When did this all like start? And what have you learned since the
Yeah, so I
first
guess
camp
the
to
idea
now?
came about around when I did the Pikes Peak marathon. I had earlier that summer I was in Alaska and I
Okay.
did a running camp with a friend of mine who runs these camps up there, and it was just a
Hmm.
normal like come up and run with us for a week, and we just had a ton of fun. It was really awesome. And we came away feeling, I just felt really close to the other campers. And I was like, this was valuable. Like we're friends now. This is meaningful. And I just like
Hmm.
personally, regardless of climate change, like I want to create something that brings people together like this. It feels really good to connect with people like this. And then I was like, everybody has has a
Yeah.
running camp these days. Like if I'm going to do this, I don't want to just copy everybody else. So being very environmentally
Hmm.
oriented, I was like, well, let's make an environmental camp. And so these ideas started like building, and I was talking to a lot of people. The original idea was about getting climate scientists and environmental scientists. It's kind of funny. Since then, we've moved away from that to some degree, where we work with a lot of scientists so that if like one of our campers needs that resource, we're like, oh yeah, this person's a professor and they'd love to chat with you.
Yeah.
But you just can't teach a lot of effective science. Like it's just complicated. It takes time. And so it's not about learning the science so much as it
Yeah.
is about business. We teach like it's like almost like a business program, where we're like working on like a budget and a strategic plan and a timeline and things like that to help people
Yeah.
use their resources the best. And the idea was to have the first camp in 2020. I had everything set up for that, and then COVID hit, so nothing happened. Which maybe was a good thing
Right.
because it gave
Right.
us another year to really get it really dialed in. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
last summer in 2021 was the first camp. It's still the only camp we've had. We've only done one.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, we finally were able to put it all
Okay.
together, and we had a week in the San Juans in Southwest Colorado, and there were just amazing people there, amazing mentors, amazing campers. It was a really magical week.
Talk me through like the process. So people who want to apply, they apply and then basically pitch
Yeah.
their idea. Is that what
So we have
happens?
an
And then what are the
application
steps of
period
the
that's
camp?
this year was from January until April, and people like propose, and we there's an
Okay.
application thing where we ask specific questions like what is your project and like how does it address climate change, how does it mobilize your community, what's the opportunity for impact, basically trying to get people to think about their project in these terms, not necessarily say all the details
Hmm.
because that really is
Hmm.
the point of the camp. And so we choose the ones that we think we can have the most effect on and create the most impact for. And then we have, separately, we have all the mentors who are experts in climate action from some way or another. Some of them really are college professors, some are professional athletes, some people are business leaders. And so then we pair the campers up with the mentors, kind of behind the scenes, and connect them. And it's like the camp's at the end of July. So in about June, we say, here's your mentor, get in touch. Well, they'll be in touch with you. We have a whole process of like preparing people for what it will
Yeah.
actually look like, trying to, I guess, prime them
Yeah.
so they know what to expect. But then once we're at the camp, it's we have a pretty straightforward process because we're at high altitude in Colorado. In the late summer, it like rains every afternoon. And so we get up in the morning, we have breakfast, and we go out for a run. And it's awesome. And so we are out in the mountains for 2 to 4 hours. And some people run and they like get after it. Some people go medium pace, and there's always a hiking group as well. It's very non-competitive. And really like the van drives and like the hiking and running, that's honestly where some of the best conversations happen, like this unstructured time.
For sure.
And then we come back, have lunch and a little break. And then in the afternoon, the mentors give a little presentation about the work they do in climate, which is really cool because we want all the campers to have a very good idea of what resources are available to them at the camp. Because that way they'll be like, oh, I didn't realize you did this work. Well, my project has this thing, but I need that. And so the mentors talk about climate action, and then we spend about 2 to 2.5 hours each day with the campers and the mentors working together on their projects. And we have a program, like kind of a curriculum where everybody works through their project. It's somewhat flexible, because the projects are so different. And we start with basically everybody doing the same thing, trying to dial in on like exactly what they do and who it's for and why they want to do it. And then we really like branch out and kind of let them follow the paths that they need to. We do a lot of stuff. The campers work with other mentors sometimes. It's it comes and goes. I don't need to get into like every gory detail, but the point is like there's a lot of really impressive people there, and everybody wants to work hard. Everybody wants to be effective, and so our purpose is just to put them together and see what happens.
Facilitators of connection, really. Just like, we love your idea. We have people that will help you make that idea come to reality.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like
spend some time.
This has been really fun for me because I'm not a climate scientist. I'm not an environmental like leader. I mean, I'm sort of maybe becoming there, but if you at least you seem to think so because you brought me on your podcast. Like because I'm in charge of this camp, it's like, oh, Dakota must know what he's doing. Well, the thing is, I think none of us really know what we're doing. We're just winging it. And also,
definitely.
I feel like I'm able to help the climate movement, even in this small way, not because I'm the most educated or the most skillful, but because I've been able to create a community that can do that stuff. And that's meaningful to me. There's a lot of different,
I think there's a lot to be said. I was going to say, I just think there's a lot to be said about the people that are the facilitators that can empower people to just like use their voice or like to say like, hey, you don't have to be perfect. And like, here's a place to start. There need to be more people that are like the match lighter, right? Like they're just like, okay, here we're going to go. Like, this is where you're going to start out. And like, let's start from here. Like, there are spaces for experts and like the people that are like literally have PhDs and like they're the, they are the scientists of things, but there are also so many spaces for people to just be like, you could be part of this too. Like it doesn't, you don't have to have a PhD to speak on this and get involved. So there's
and so that has worked for me. And I just say that mainly because I feel like there's people listening who feel like they're not qualified to take action on climate change, or they don't know what to do or how to make it work. And neither do I. But really, like what has worked and what has made people think that I do know what I'm talking about, at least enough to invite me on their podcast, is I think that like it's really important to be willing to fail. And especially in like a very politically charged issue like climate change, people are afraid to be wrong because there's all these like very vocal super minority. You're always afraid that they're gonna like dig in and be like, oh yeah, well, you don't know what you're talking about, so why would anybody listen to you? And that's just not how progress is made. You make progress by trying and failing, and when you figure out something that doesn't work, you stop doing that and try something new. Like this is how progress is actually made. And so I don't know, you can criticize me all you want, but you're probably not going to criticize me more than I criticize myself. And we're learning a ton every single day, and so that's valuable.
I feel like we aren't able to grow in any capacity if we don't fail.
It's
if we
just
don't
like running.
Risk, you know what I mean? Like if you
gotta go out and you gotta struggle. Running is not always beautiful and easy.
Someone else is gonna do it. Yes. Yeah. I mean, that was such a perfect analogy when you were talking about that too, of like, we have to get uncomfortable. We have to be able to like get into like some nitty gritty, like questionable spaces where you're like, can I make it out of this? Like, am I going to back out and tap out? And then you find like that drive inside of you, that will, whatever that purpose is, to keep going, to pursue and like really grind it out. Like that's relevant in trail running, but it's relevant in, anything to do with your passion, like, or taking care of the planet, or like any kind of project that you may have. It's so important to find that thing that just like keeps you going, that, even if you're not the best at it, like I'm never going to be a professional or elite runner, but I love it a lot. And, I'll be out there slogging it out, like struggling, but also like so grateful. And it just continues to give me more insight into who I am as a person, but also more will and like more, I don't know, just like the ability to kind of continuously persevere and endure, and to say, okay, like that door didn't open the way I thought it was going to, but I'll find another way to figure it out. Yeah, I'm curious too of how you find your mentors. Like what was like, if you just had like a lot of connections from Protect Our Winters, or like what did that look like? Or are you always kind of just like tapping into your network? Was that just
that was one of the first tests about whether the camp would even be feasible, is like, can I actually get people who know about climate change to come? And I was really super grateful. People did want to come. And part of it, I think, is that, I reached out to a lot of academics who do have PhDs. They're very highly qualified. And I've had a really positive response from that community. And I think a big part of that is because a lot of academics feel really stifled in the academic space, because a lot of people, they have to spend their whole careers like writing these technical research papers, which are read by other researchers who already understand the issue. I think I've gotten the impression, and I may be wrong, but I've gotten the impression that there's like a disconnect between like research science and the public, and public action and public awareness. And so something like this, I think, is a lot of people see as an opportunity to connect the research and the real science that's going on with public and action. At least that and that's something that I certainly want to be the case. I guess just
I was going to say, I feel like it would be exciting for a scientist to be able to like inspire and facilitate, with like people
exactly.
Who are eager
and we're lucky. A lot of people, like professors at colleges, they deal with kids who are kind of less motivated. You can be like, everybody at Footprints is psyched to be there. They're ready to work hard. So that's a fun environment, I think. And so, I just like reached out to people. I'm fortunate to have a lot of connections. And so with Protect Our Winters, they connected me with people. If you know Claire Gallagher, a very successful trail runner and also a Patagonia athlete, and a very impressive environmental advocate of hers in her own, she connected me with a lot of different people. And so I just did my best to try to come up with a multidisciplinary group, a lot of professional athletes, because that, a lot of professional athletes have worked with brands for a long time, and they know how to put on events, and they, really, it's like, you don't have to have a PhD. I don't care about that at all. It looks good for us, I guess, if I'm like, oh yeah, we have all these like doctorates in our group. But what matters is about how can you mobilize your community, and like athletes and artists and musicians, they can do that really well in a really cool way. So a lot of that. It also helps our advertising. We're like, look at this pro athlete who's going to be there, And now it's like a year later, we have a really good website. We have a really good video from last summer's camp. We're able to attract more people. And so it's really fun. People are into it. Like, not everybody can do it, but I often just like reach for the stars and cold call people, and I get a great response. Like, we just gotten this amazing new mentor like 2 weeks ago, who is just perfect. Like,
oh, that's incredible. Because honestly, like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Someone will say no. Like, you never know unless you ask or if you try. And I feel like that just goes further into like what we've been talking about too. Like, we can't just like sit back and be like, I don't know, that might not work out for me. And then you just don't even try. Everybody just like, you just have to take a step and see what will happen, and then grow from there. Take every lesson and every setback as like an opportunity to just pivot and try something different, and like learn from those things and keep going. And like, if you had never taken the risk or wanted to try at all, like this wouldn't even exist. And now you're just going to continue to facilitate and empower more people to like go within their communities and do more good, and hopefully, you know, bring in more people from their community, and then it just becomes like an even bigger force for, you know, like going up to voting and like doing more in their communities, but then more on a national level. If we had more people that were just, you know, taking initiative to take those steps and be leaders in their communities,
Definitely.
then what a
Yeah.
different
And
place we
so,
would be in.
you know, moving forward for us, we're going to keep putting on camps, and we want to put on eventually, you know, more camps, and we want to improve the product so that it's always getting better. We
Yeah.
also want to make it accessible to people who don't come to the camps. And so we have a lot of different ways to do that, but hopefully one day coming to our website and watching our videos will be ways that people can learn about climate action and how they can like really take action. It's not just about raising awareness. That doesn't matter. People know about climate change. It's about action.
Yeah.
And so we want to provide every possible resource so anybody who comes to our website free of charge can figure this stuff out. And we have a lot of different ways of doing that. A lot of it, honestly, is just like collecting resources that already exist. You know, we're like the opposite of a brand. We'll give away basically everything that we know and do if you're going to use it to take action on climate change. And when there's already an organization doing good work that you want to do, it's way, way better to get involved with them than to start your own whole thing. And so just creating like a hub and a resource for people to figure out who's doing the good work and how they can get involved, like that, I think that can go a long way. And then just sharing it with as many people as possible.
Absolutely.
So advertising, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. I just love that this even exists. And like my hope, because even what you're saying, like my hope is that everyone will hear this and be like, yeah, we want to get involved. And like, you know, we want to share out these resources and be a part of this, and hopefully look up what you're doing. But then also maybe some of these incredible minds will want to apply for next year. You know what I mean? Like, and just give more opportunity for people to do good, create projects, and then like send this off into the national light, and then hopefully that's just an ongoing never-ending cycle of inspiring people to do good.
So I guess if there's a call to action I have for this, it's basically just to join us. You know, reach out to me if you have these ideas. Tell me what you think. You know, it's called runfootprints.com. You can see what we do and how, and watch our video from last year. And basically we just want people involved. You know, send us your ideas. We have like a whole list of collaborators, because people reach out and they're like, hey, you know, I'm actually like an expert in this topic, and if you ever need any help, let me know. And we do. Often somebody needs specific help with their project, with that thing. And so we'll connect the campers around. It's really, really fun to be able to connect these people like that. And I guess drawing it back to Protect Our Winters is we still work really closely with them. They gave us a grant this year, and we get a ton of mentorship from them as well. And so joining Team POW, which is like their membership program, that gives you a ton of resources for climate action. And they're really, really good. We are still developing at Footprints our resources beyond the camps themselves, because it's basically me and one other guy at this point. But we're expanding significantly. And so, we rely heavily on POW for some like mentorship. And I just think that what they do, they're talking to what they call the outdoor state. The outdoor state, 50 million people who identify as outdoors people. And we want to get those people to vote. So that's a huge number. We're working with 10 people at Footprints, right? So we're like taking a lot of what POW does and kind of contextualizing it into individual lives. And so it's like similar project, but at a different scale. Yeah, I guess. And also, if you would like to donate to Protect or to Footprints, we would love that. There's a little button on our website.
I was going to ask, so you kind of like perfectly and seamlessly floated into kind of like my wrap-up questions. So my first one for you was, where can people find you? So is there anywhere else that people can find you beyond just the website? But repeat that too, just in case. And then obviously, if there are any other spaces for anybody to donate beyond just like on the website, if there's like a Patreon or like anything like that.
Yeah. So, our website is the best way to find out what we do. It's www.runfootprints.com. And we're really proud of our website. We just got these really cool images that are like half watercolor, half picture. So I think you'd like it. Yeah.
It's so cool.
You just go check those out, even if you don't do anything else.
This is so beautiful.
And then there's the donate button at the top, right? And that's the best way to do it. It's pretty seamless there. We also, have an Instagram. We're Footprints Running, and so you can follow our updates. And we're trying to use that as a tool to talk about climate change and climate action as well. We'll tell stories about our campers or our mentors and our partners, and try to basically, like, if people follow us, this is a work in progress, but we want people who follow us to be like constantly getting a little tip, or like, here's a great organization doing this work. Here's like, did you know that this kind of collective action is meaningful? Really trying to focus in on collective action, storytelling, and bringing people together.
Perfect. Yeah, that's so great. Yes, everyone, that's
Yeah.
your call to action. Please go check out the website, donate if you have the means. And obviously, if not, like sharing and just like getting the word out there about Footprints is amazing too. Just getting more people involved when we can. And then the last thing I have for you is, what does keeping nature
Keeping
wild
nature
mean to
wild.
you?
I think it means I see biodiversity in there. I think the keeping nature wild is something that is challenging with 7 billion and more people on the planet, and our and the conception, like the idea of wildness, is it's an idea. It's not a real thing. It's something that we ascribe to the places that we go, and so I feel like biodiversity is a big marker, a way to maybe quantify that, because if there's a biodiverse landscape, it generally means it's more healthy and more able to produce energy and store energy and capture carbon and these sorts of things. The simple fact is that we can't really think about moving forward and creating a better world without thinking about how people will interact with this space. Even a wilderness area, which is intentionally not created for people, is managed by people. It's created by people. It's these sorts of things are created with these like historical and personal and societal expectations and perspectives. And so keeping nature wild is not always about like saying, okay, well, wildness existed before 1800 and we got to get it back to there. It's about like, how can we store energy, store carbon, and like keep our planet stable and providing for humans for the long term.
Yeah, that was great. That was such a good wrap up too. And I feel like I love asking
Yeah.
that question because everybody's answer is so different. And it's just like, yeah, this beautiful kind of like tied up ribbon of each person. Like everybody's response always aligns
Nice.
so well with like everything they've said in ahead of time. So yeah, that was wonderful and such a great point too. Yeah, it's just keeping our environment and the planet in a place where we can preserve it and conserve it for long term, and like like be able to sustain
Exactly.
what we have right now too. So I think that's wonderful. I just want to thank you so much for sharing time with me. And now I feel like I'm like all
Yeah.
impassioned. I'm like,
Make
I'm
it
gonna
happen.
be in Silverton in July too. So I'm like,
I hope
hopefully
so.
I'll pass with your camp because that would be the
Well, thanks so much
next
for having me on here. It's been a really,
one. But
really big
yes,
honor. I really appreciate it.
yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And yeah, I hope that every person listening just takes the time to look up Footprints, learn more, and obviously just, take what you've learned in this podcast episode and take it
Yeah.
out into the world and like utilize it because, yes, we all need to be imperfect advocates. That's so important. And I think that's like one of the biggest takeaways for us from this episode is just, doing what we can in the ways that you can in the place that you are. And using
Yeah.
that as a
Sometimes
vehicle,
just
even if it's
talking about
small.
it is the most important thing.
But
Just being
knowing,
willing to
yeah,
talk about it. It's all that matters.
yeah.
That's what Catherine Hayhoe says, and she's
Mhm.
amazing.
So yeah, thank you so much again. I can't wait to see more of what you're going to be doing and how the camps go, and just the amazing ideas and projects that come from this space that you've created. So thank you for being a person that takes the steps to take risk and do
Well,
something
I mean, you are
that's
too.
needed.
You're bringing people together with the podcast and your running group and so many others. It all matters.
I'm excited. Yeah, I'm so excited to share this out and like let more people know of like what you're doing and that this exists because I think it's incredible. So, yeah, as a trail runner and as an environmental like advocate, I'm just like, thank you for what you're doing because it's exactly the space that we need and to bring these communities even outside of running, but bringing our community together and in eliciting even more powerful responses of taking care of
Yeah,
these spaces that we're out in
I
all the
love it.
time.
Thank you so
So
much.
yeah, thank you. Yeah,
You
okay,
too.
well, have a great
Talk
rest
to
of
you
your Monday.
soon.